Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Store-bought pesto, that is crazy. Let's see if I could top that. So back in June of 2009, I started dating this guy. It was pretty toxic. For about 3 or 4 months, we dated straight through. Then we broke up for the first time. And then all the way until March of 2010, we kind of got back together, broke up, got back together, broke up. I swear it was literally 35-ish times that we did that back and forth. And then finally, March of 2010, I was just done with it. Quick disclaimer, I was 17 and he was 22, and I didn't see what was wrong with that at the time. Another disclaimer, a lot of the times that I got back with him, the reason for that was that he would tell me he was going to unalive himself if I left, and that made me feel very guilty. So we were together on and off for 7 months. I was trying to finish out my senior year. I still had prom to do. I was in all-district choir and had to perform in that. I was getting ready for graduation. I was getting ready for college. And throughout all of these important life things that was going on in my life at the time, he was always popping up. He would constantly text me saying that he misses me and that we should get back together. And I don't think he was truly understanding that I was done for good. And when all of the typical, things that he would do weren't working anymore, then he got really upset. One day he had texted me, and I just finally had said it straightforward that we are never getting back together. And then like an hour or two later, it was the weekend, I was chilling upstairs, and I heard my mom arguing with someone downstairs. And then when I went out of my room, I was upstairs to kind of listen in and see what was going on. My ex, had just barged right into the house and was fighting with my mom. So I went downstairs, and to try to negate the situation, to stop them from fighting, I told him I'd go talk to him. And I'm young and I wasn't thinking. And he suggested going somewhere. I got in his car. I know, not the smartest thing. We drove somewhere, and I did not know where I was. So I did start to feel very scared. He just keeps asking me over and over again, why don't you want to get back together? I'm telling him that we are not a good match, and I'm saying all these things, and just nothing's working. He just isn't accepting that as a valid answer. And he tells me that he's not bringing me home until I tell him I love him and say that I want to get back with him. I just shut down, and it felt like an interrogation. I was with him it was starting to get dark. I think it was like 2 or 3 hours that I was with him, and thankfully I didn't have to do that, and he brought me home. So when I got back home, my mom said she was going to call the police if he ever came near me again, and he seemed to understand that. So for the next couple years, I was in a few relationships. When I was single, I would just post selfies of myself, and I would get compliments from various guys. Now, we'll call this ex I've been talking about, we'll call him Blake from now on. So I'm dating this other guy, and he asks me, do you know a Blake? And I kind of freeze, because I'm like, maybe it's someone else. And I told him, maybe I do. Why? And this boyfriend at the time told me that this Blake guy messaged him saying that I was cheating on my boyfriend, my current boyfriend at the time. And I looked at my boyfriend's phone, and it was Blake, and it was my ex that was just making up all these stories about me that weren't true. This also happened in 2 other relationships that I had around this time, where they said this guy named Blake was messaging them saying I was cheating on him, and just all these bullshit stories. And then when I was single and I was trying to get with certain guys, I had at least 6 of them in 6 different situations where they had told me that, I don't think I want to pursue anything with you because word around the street is that you have a boyfriend. And I would be like, I don't have a boyfriend. And they would tell me that this guy named Blake told them that he was my boyfriend. So for a couple of years, my ex was cock blocking me with guys I potentially could have had good connections with. And fortunately, he wasn't the reason why my other relationships broke up. But in 1 or 2 of those relationships, at least, this situation caused a big fight. So that was going on during the rest of 2010, 2011, 2012. We get to 2013. That was one of the hardest years of my life. I had a very serious long-term relationship end during that year, and I lost my grandma. The good news was during the end of that year, I found a job that I did stay with for a good 6 years. The problem was that my ex Blake found out where I worked and he started showing up. Now, at this point, I have his phone number blocked. I have him blocked on social media, but that didn't even matter because he just kept making more social media profiles. So I knew he was always going to see my posts. But when he would show up at my job, which I worked in retail, he would walk just really fast through the store, and it was weird. I also noticed it was kind of weird, like when he would show up in my life, because it seemed kind of sporadic. It wasn't like day after day after day. Sometimes like a month could go by, or 6 months could go by, or maybe it was just a couple weeks. Maybe it was like a full year. I never knew when he was going to show up again. But I had figured out the pattern to that. When he entered a relationship, he would stop coming around me. And the moment that he was single, he'd be right back on me. I've actually had two of his ex boyfriends reach out to me. One of them was dating him at the time and was kind of just like cussing me out. He was telling me, stay away from my man. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't no idea who this guy was. And or that my ex Blake was dating him, but he told me that, oh, Blake told me that you're hitting him up all the time and flirting with him, and I want you to effing stop. Another one of his exes reached out to me after they broke up, and I just feel so bad for what this guy went through. He told me that Blake was talking about me constantly, saying that I was the one that got away. This gentleman was naturally a blonde, and Blake would tell him that, oh, I think you'd be really sexy with brown hair as a brunette. I have brown hair. I don't know if there was a connection there, but there was that. This gentleman also told me when they were intimate once that Blake said my name. He called him Frank or Frankie instead. So now we're in 2016 and I end up having to transfer stores. So now I'm in a different area. I don't know how, but my ex found out and he started showing up at that store. This time was a little bit different. He would do his walking really fast through this location. He'd only stay maybe like 3 to 5 minutes, but now he was starting to come back every day. And he did that for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. I told my bosses at the time that this was making me very uncomfortable, that my ex keeps coming in. They would have me, I used to have to hide in the break room or in the office, anywhere where the door could lock. So I think at this point I was just done being afraid. I'm like, I'm going to just confront him. I confront him. He tells me that a family member of his passed away and that he misses me. And I told him I'm sorry for his loss, but he cannot keep coming back here. And he did listen and he did not show up to my work again. I almost forgot to mention, between the years of like 2013 and 2018, he did catfish me a few times that I know on various dating profiles. One of those times I actually went to go meet in person. I thought I was meeting the guy I was talking to for a couple months in the pictures, and it turned out to be Blake. And I was embarrassed and hurt and mad and scared and had to just like completely exit and go away that like I typically wouldn't to go home. And for anyone who might be wondering, I did try to get a restraining order a couple of times. Cops told me various things to why it couldn't happen. One of the first times they told me was that he wasn't physically harming me or breaking into my home, or it wasn't like this constant harassment, so there was nothing they could do there. One of the last times that I contacted the authorities about this, I just gave up after this because they literally told me, why can't you guys settle this like men? So now we're in the year 2020. This is 10 years after we broke up. To sort of wrap up the last few years, because now this year would make it 13 years, almost 14 years ago that we broke up. There was various situations, one being that during 2020, during the pandemic, I ordered food through DoorDash. He ended up being my dasher. He found out once again where I lived. I had moved like 7 times in 6 years, so he wasn't necessarily coming to my homes back then, but once again, now he has my address. During 2021, one of my aunts calls me one day. She tells me there's this new guy that started working with her, that they're getting along, and that she was actually trying to set us up. And when she showed him a picture of me, that's when she put 2 and 2 together by his reaction. She didn't even recognize him, that it was Blake that she was working with. Those last 2 may have been coincidental, but I don't know. But yes, Susie, store-bought pesto is crazy.